To the channel of my associate Agnes Thompson, and my name is Emma, and I will share my story with you. Subscribe to us.
My name is Emma, and I'm 78 years old, though most folks say I don't look a day over 65. My hands, still calloused from years tending to the Vance orchards, were usually busy, always finding something to do, whether it was pruning the old apple trees or kneading dough for my famous peach cobbler. Life in Harmony Creek had been good to me, a quiet rhythm of seasons and family, of hard work and honest living. The Vance orchards, a sprawling 100 acres nestled in the fertile valleys of upstate New York, weren't just land and trees. They were my legacy, my husband Arthur's dream, and the lifeblood of generations. We'd built it from the ground up, turning a small plot of forgotten land into a thriving business, known far and wide for its crisp, sweet apples and our artisanal ciders. Arthur, bless his gentle soul, had passed 10 years ago, leaving me not just with the farm, but with a quiet strength I didn't know I possessed until I had to carry on without him. Our son, Michael, was our only child. He'd grown up on the farm, theoretically learning the ropes, but his heart was always more in the city, in the quick, shiny world of finance. He'd moved to Boston right after college, chasing numbers and spreadsheets, leaving the rich scent of apple blossoms behind. We visited, of course, and he'd come home for holidays, but the connection to the land, to the roots of our family, had always felt tenuous with Michael. He saw the farm as an asset, a commodity, not a living, breathing entity that had nourished us all these years. The day Michael arrived unannounced, his sleek black sedan pulling up the gravel driveway, felt like a shift in the wind, a sudden chill in the air that promised a storm. It was a Tuesday in late October, the last of the Honeycrisps were being picked, and the air was thick with the sweet, earthy smell of fallen leaves and ripe fruit. I was in the packing shed, overseeing the grading, my hands sticky with apple juice, when he walked in. He was dressed in a sharp suit, a stark contrast to the worn jeans and flannel shirts that were the unofficial uniform of the orchard. His smile, usually quick and charming, seemed a little too fixed, a little too bright. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a surprisingly stiff hug. "You look well." "As well as an old apple tree in autumn, I suppose," I replied, a slight unease settling in my stomach. Michael rarely made unscheduled visits, and when he did, there was always an agenda. We sat on the porch swing later, the one Arthur and I had built together, watching the sun dip behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I offered him some of my apple pie, still warm from the oven, but he barely touched it. He kept clearing his throat, adjusting his tie, his gaze drifting over the familiar landscape as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps, evaluating it. "Mom," he finally began, his voice surprisingly firm, "we need to talk about your future." My future. The words hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. I had always thought my future was here, on this farm, surrounded by the rhythm of the seasons and the scent of apples. "My future seems pretty set, Michael," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "More pies, more apples, maybe a new cider blend next spring." He sighed, a long, exasperated sound that immediately put me on edge. "Mom, be serious. You're getting older. You're not as spry as you used to be. This place is a lot to handle." I felt a prickle of annoyance. I still ran the farm, managed the small crew, handled the books. I was perfectly capable. "I managed just fine, thank you very much." "But for how long?" He pressed, his voice softening, but with an underlying current of steel. "What if something happens? What if you fall? What if you forget to take your medication?" I bristled. I took my medication religiously, a small handful of vitamins and a blood pressure pill, nothing more. "I don't forget things, Michael. And I'm not frail." "Look, Mom, this isn't easy for me to say," he continued, leaning forward, his hands clasped earnestly. "But for your own safety, for your well-being, I've been looking into some options. Some really nice places, with excellent care, nurses on call 24/7, activities, other people your age to socialize with." He was talking about a nursing home. The words hung unspoken in the air, but their meaning was clear, sharp and cold as a winter wind. My heart, which had always beat in rhythm with the seasons of the orchard, seemed to skip a beat, then pound with a sudden, fierce anger. A nursing home? Me? Emma, confined to a room, waiting for someone to tell me when to eat, when to sleep, when to breathe? A nursing home? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though I felt a roar inside me. He nodded, a look of what he probably thought was concern etched on his face. Yes, Mom. It's for the best. I've already done a lot of research. There's a place just an hour from Boston, Evergreen Manor. It's highly rated. Beautiful grounds. And they have a fantastic program for seniors who enjoy gardening. I thought you'd like that. Gardening. He thought a small plot of roses and petunias, tended under the watchful eye of a nurse, could replace the 100 acres of land that was ingrained in my very soul. And what about the farm, Michael? I asked, my voice now steady, though my hands, hidden in my lap, were clenched into fists. He waved a dismissive hand. Oh, the farm. Well, that's part of the plan. It's a valuable asset, Mom. A very valuable asset. Once you're settled, we can liquidate it. Get a good price. That money can go towards your care, and the rest can be managed for your future needs. Liquidate. The word hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just talking about a nursing home, he was talking about selling the Vance orchards. Selling Arthur's dream. Selling my life. I looked at him, truly looked at him. The boy I had raised, the one who used to run through these very rows of apple trees, his face sticky with juice, his laughter echoing in the evening air. Where had that boy gone? Replaced by this smooth, calculating man who saw his heritage as mere numbers on a balance sheet. You've been looking into this for a while, haven't you? I said, the realization dawning on me with a sickening lurch. He shifted uncomfortably. Well, Mom, I've been worried. For a long time. It's a big responsibility, taking care of a place like this. And frankly, with the market as it is, it's the perfect time to sell. The land alone is worth a fortune. And what about my wishes, Michael? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Did you consider my wishes? Of course, Mom. Your wishes are paramount. And I believe this is what's best for you. Security, comfort, no more worries about leaky roofs or tractor repairs. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I've brought the admission forms for Evergreen Manor. And some power of attorney documents. Just a formality, so I can handle things for you, make sure you're taken care of. My gaze fell on the documents. Power of attorney. Admission forms. He wasn't asking, he was telling. He had already decided. He had already signed. The realization was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. This wasn't a discussion, it was an execution. A lifetime of memories flashed before my eyes, Arthur's strong hands planting the first saplings, the laughter of children during apple-picking season, the smell of fermenting cider in the autumn air. This land was not just dirt and trees, it was the story of us. And Michael, my own son, was preparing to rip it out from under me. I looked at his expectant face, his eyes earnest, almost pleading. He truly believed he was doing the right thing, in his own twisted way. Or perhaps, he simply believed he was entitled to it. And in that moment, I knew. I knew I couldn't argue with him, couldn't fight him head-on with words. He had already built his fortress of logic and convenience around him. But I was Emma. And I had a few tricks up my sleeve. Tricks learned from years of negotiating with shrewd buyers, outsmarting pests, and coaxing life from the stubborn earth. Arthur had always said I was as tough as an old oak tree, and just as deeply rooted. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch between us, the only sound the distant hoot of an owl. Then, I surprised him, and perhaps myself. All right, Michael, I said, my voice calm, almost serene. Let me see the papers. His eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of triumph in them. Really, Mom? You'll consider it? I gave him a small, tight smile. I'll consider it. After all, you've gone to so much trouble. I took the pen he offered and, with a hand that didn't tremble, began to sign the documents. I signed where he told me, initialed where he pointed. My name, Emma, flowing smoothly across the dotted lines, seemingly sealing my fate. He beamed, relief washing over his face. That's my practical mom. I knew you'd understand. This is going to be so much better for you. I simply nodded, keeping my gaze down, pretending to read the fine print. Inside, a storm was brewing. A cold, quiet fury that was sharper than any blade. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted the old woman. He had no idea what he had just set in motion. I'll arrange for a moving service next week, he said, already on his phone, his voice animated. Just a few boxes, your essentials. The rest can be donated or sold. Donate or sell my life. My memories. My home. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. But I kept my face impassive. Whatever you think is best, Michael. He talked for a while longer, about the benefits of Evergreen Manor, about the rising real estate market, about how smart he was being with my assets. I listened, nodding occasionally, my mind racing, 1,000 thoughts swirling, each one a thread in a new, intricate plan. He left shortly after, a satisfied smile on his face, believing he had neatly packaged up his elderly mother and her inconvenient farm. As the taillights of his sedan disappeared down the driveway, I walked back into the silent house. The smell of apples seemed to mock me, a cruel reminder of what was about to be lost. But I wasn't lost. Not yet. I walked over to the old mahogany desk in the living room, the one Arthur had inherited from his grandfather. I pulled out a hidden drawer, one Michael didn't even know existed. Inside, tucked away beneath old deeds and letters, was a small, worn leather-bound book. My journal. And next to it, a separate, more official-looking document. A document that had been carefully prepared, years ago, and updated just last year. My fingers traced the elegant script on the document. It was legally binding, meticulously detailed, and completely unexpected. It was my safeguard, my insurance policy against exactly this kind of betrayal. Arthur and I had discussed it often, in hushed tones late at night, long before he got sick. We'd seen what happened to other families, the squabbles over land and money, the disregard for elders once they were deemed incapable. We had prepared. We had planned. And Michael, in his arrogant haste, had overlooked the one thing that truly mattered. I knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. It would require cunning, patience, and a resolve harder than any granite. But as I looked out at the moonlit orchard, the ancient trees standing sentinel in the darkness, I felt a surge of defiant energy. This was my home. This was my legacy. And no smooth-talking city boy, not even my own son, was going to take it from me. He thought he had signed me away to a nursing home. But what he had really signed, unknowingly, was the beginning of his own reckoning. My first call was to Abigail, my lawyer, a sharp woman in her late 40s who had handled all of Arthur's affairs and continued to handle mine. She was known for her calm demeanor and her iron will when it came to defending her clients. Abigail, it's Emma, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within me. Michael just left. We need to talk. There was a pause on the other end, then a sigh. I had a feeling this call would come, Eleanor. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Abigail. But we have work to do. He's planning to sell the orchard. And he thinks he signed me into Evergreen Manor. I see, she said, her voice devoid of emotion, a professional mask already in place. Did he mention anything about the trust? No, I said, a faint smile touching my lips. Not a word. Good, she replied, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring the documents he had you sign, and any other relevant papers. This is going to be interesting. The next few days were a blur of calculated moves. I packed a small bag, just as Michael had instructed, a few changes of clothes, some toiletries, and, crucially, my worn leather journal and the official document. I made sure to leave behind anything of sentimental value that might be seen as belongings for the nursing home, knowing full well they wouldn't be going there. The house felt strangely empty, haunted by the knowledge of what was to come. On Thursday morning, a sleek black car, clearly arranged by Michael, pulled up to the house. A young, polite woman stepped out, introduced herself as Maria, and explained she was from Evergreen Manor, here to help me with the transition. She was overly solicitous, her smile a little too wide, her eyes darting around the house, assessing its contents with a calculating gaze. It was clear she was under the impression that this was a routine pickup of an elderly, slightly confused woman. I played the part perfectly, feigning a gentle confusion about what to pack, asking innocuous questions about the gardening program at the facility. As we drove away from the Vance orchards, I looked back at the familiar silhouette of the farmhouse, the rows of trees stretching out in the crisp autumn air. A pang of loss, sharp and undeniable, pierced through me. But beneath it, a resilient determination hardened my resolve. This wasn't goodbye. This was just a tactical retreat. When we arrived at Evergreen Manor, it was exactly as Michael had described, pristine, modern, almost sterile. The air hummed with a quiet efficiency, the scent of antiseptic mingling with a faint hint of potpourri. Maria led me to a small, cheerfully decorated room. It was comfortable, clean, but utterly devoid of the life that pulsed through my old farmhouse. There was a small twin bed, a dresser, a single armchair, and a window overlooking a manicured lawn. A cage. A golden cage, perhaps, but a cage nonetheless. "Here you are, Mrs. Vance," Maria said, her voice bright. "Make yourself at home. Lunch is at noon in the dining hall. And feel free to explore the common areas. We have a wonderful library and a crafts room." I smiled, a vague, distant smile, and nodded. "Thank you, dear. It all seems very nice." She left, presumably to report back to Michael that his mother was safely ensconced. As soon as the door clicked shut, the smile vanished from my face. I walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly trimmed hedges and the distant, polite chatter of other residents on the patio. This was not my life. This would never be my life. My first priority was a phone call. Not to Michael, not yet. He would get his surprise in due time. My call was to a discreet private investigator I had hired weeks ago, on Abigail's advice, when Michael's concern for my well-being had first started to feel suspicious. His name was Frank Miller, a gruff but efficient man who specialized in corporate due diligence and asset tracking. "Frank, it's Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice low, just above a whisper, as I paced the small room. "Mrs. Vance," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "Report on Michael Vance is complete. You were right to be concerned. He's in deep. Very deep." A cold dread twisted in my stomach, confirming my worst fears. "Tell me everything." He did. Michael, it turned out, wasn't just worried about my health. He was in serious financial trouble. His successful career in Boston was built on a house of cards. Bad investments, speculative ventures that had gone south, and a lifestyle far beyond his means had led him to accrue a mountain of debt. He owed money to several unsavory characters, and the pressure was mounting. The Vance orchards weren't just a convenient asset, they were his desperate lifeline. He intended to sell the farm, pay off his debts, and salvage his crumbling empire, all while passing it off as caring for his elderly mother. The anger that had simmered within me now boiled over, a righteous blaze. He wasn't just abandoning me, he was plundering my family's legacy to cover his own reckless mistakes. It wasn't just about disrespect, it was about outright theft. "And the buyers?" I asked, my voice tight. "He's been in talks with a large agricultural conglomerate, AgriCorp Global," Frank revealed. "They're known for buying up family farms, consolidating them, then selling them off in pieces for development. They're a predatory bunch, Mrs. Vance. And they're offering a significant sum, but it's a quick sale, likely below market value, which tells me Michael is desperate." AgriCorp Global. The name was like a curse on my tongue. They were everything Arthur and I had fought against, the corporatization of farming, the destruction of local economies, the disregard for the land. The thought of them turning Vance orchards into another sterile, industrialized operation, churning out bland, mass-produced fruit, made my blood run cold. "Thank you, Frank," I said, a plan solidifying in my mind. "Keep digging. I need every piece of information you can find on Michael's debts and his dealings with AgriCorp. And quietly, without attracting any attention, I need you to do some research on local land trusts and environmental protection agencies. Ones that specialize in preserving agricultural land." "You got it, Mrs. Vance," he said. "Anything else?" "One more thing," I said, looking out the window at the manicured lawn, a stark contrast to the wild beauty of my orchards. "I need to know how easily one can disappear from a place like this, without causing a fuss." There was a chuckle on the other end. "Consider it done. You'd be surprised how many folks find creative ways to leave. Especially when they're not really sick." I hung up, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips. Michael thought he had me locked away, safe and sound. He thought he was free to dismantle my life's work. He thought wrong. The old oak tree was still rooted, and she was about to show her son the true meaning of a family legacy. The clock was ticking. Michael would soon begin the process of selling the farm. I had to act, and quickly. But how does an elderly woman, supposedly confined to a nursing home, outsmart a cunning, desperate son and a powerful corporation? The answer lay not in force, but in the quiet, overlooked power of legacy, and the intricate web of legal documents that had been prepared for months, years even, for just such an eventuality. The initial days at Evergreen Manor were an exercise in quiet observation and calculated patience. I adopted the demeanor of a sweet, slightly disoriented elder, nodding vaguely at instructions, asking repetitive questions about the gardening program, and generally presenting myself as exactly what Michael wanted me to be: docile, harmless, and conveniently out of the way. I ate the bland, institutional food, participated in the equally bland activities: bingo, chair yoga, documentary viewings about faraway lands I had no desire to see, all while my mind was a whirlwind of planning. My room, despite its lack of personal charm, became my command center. I used the small, clunky flip phone Frank had provided, knowing Michael wouldn't track it, to communicate with him and Abigail. Frank's reports painted an increasingly grim picture of Michael's financial predicament. He was not just in debt, he was facing bankruptcy, and possibly legal trouble if certain creditors decided to press charges. The sale of Vance orchards wasn't just a desire, it was an absolute necessity for him to stay afloat. He had leveraged everything, including his own home, on a series of disastrous investments. Abigail, on the other hand, was my legal anchor. She meticulously reviewed the power of attorney documents Michael had coerced me into signing. "He was clever, Eleanor," she admitted during one of our hushed calls. "He used a broad form, giving him significant control over your financial and medical decisions. But he made one critical mistake." "The trust," I murmured, a flicker of satisfaction passing through me. "Precisely," Abigail confirmed. "The Vance family irrevocable trust. Established 20 years ago, updated regularly, with you as the sole trustee and the primary beneficiary. The orchards, the farmhouse, all the significant assets, were transferred into that trust years ago. Michael is not a beneficiary, nor does he have any power over the trust assets. And crucially, the trust explicitly states that upon your demise, the assets are to be placed into a perpetual endowment for agricultural education scholarships, and a portion is designated for local land preservation initiatives. There are also stipulations about selling the land, only to specific, approved entities that commit to maintaining its agricultural integrity, or to a pre-approved land trust." A quiet smile spread across my face. Arthur, bless his foresight. He had always been wary of the future, of the potential for external pressures or, God forbid, internal family strife. We had worked with Abigail years ago to set up this trust, ensuring the farm's legacy would endure, no matter what. It was designed to protect the orchards from exactly this kind of predatory interest, whether from greedy corporations or misguided heirs. "He doesn't know about it, does he?" I asked. "Not a whisper," Abigail chuckled softly. You kept that exceptionally close to the vest. He likely assumed, as many do, that everything was still under your direct ownership, or that a standard will would suffice. The power of attorney only gives him authority over your personal assets, not assets held in an irrevocable trust where you are merely the trustee. So, he can't sell the farm, I stated, the relief washing over me, cool and refreshing as a spring rain. Not without violating the terms of the trust, which would trigger a massive legal battle he'd undoubtedly lose, and potentially expose him to fraud charges for attempting to sell assets he doesn't control, Abigail explained. Any title company, any legitimate buyer, would discover the trust during their due diligence process. And that's where he's going to hit a brick wall. This was the core of my plan, the foundation of my countermove. Michael, in his arrogant assumption of control, had overlooked the fundamental legal structure I had put in place. He was playing a game of checkers, while I had been setting up a chess board for decades. My next step was the disappearance. Frank had provided me with a detailed map of the nursing home's perimeter, the shift changes of staff, and even the blind spots in their camera system, surprisingly few, but enough for a determined individual. I wasn't planning a dramatic escape. That would cause too much alarm, too much attention. I needed to be gone, but not obviously escaped. The opportunity arose 3 days later, during one of the daily nature walks in the enclosed garden. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, a light breeze rustling the last of the colorful leaves. The staff, thinking I was just another frail old woman enjoying the fresh air, weren't paying close attention. I lagged behind the group, feigning a sudden need to tie my shoelace. As the others rounded a corner, out of sight of the supervising aide, I slipped through a small, unlocked gate that led to a maintenance path. It was exactly as Frank had described, a quick dash through a patch of overgrown bushes, and I was on the outer perimeter road, just beyond the watchful eyes of Evergreen Manor. A nondescript sedan, an older model with tinted windows, was waiting, exactly where Frank had said it would be. The driver, a young man with a kind face and a baseball cap pulled low, nodded briefly as I slid into the back seat. He didn't speak, just drove, calmly and efficiently, as if picking up a relative from a casual outing. Within minutes, the manicured lawns of Evergreen Manor were fading in the rearview mirror. My destination was not Harmony Creek. Not yet. I couldn't risk Michael finding me there, not until he had fully faced the consequences of his actions. Frank had arranged for me to stay at a small, secluded cabin nestled deep in the Adirondack Mountains, owned by a former client of his who owed him a favor. It was rustic, off-grid, and offered the perfect anonymity. I would be safe there, out of sight, yet fully connected to the outside world through satellite internet and Frank's secure communication network. From the cabin, I began my work. The most immediate concern was protecting the orchard's reputation and preparing for the inevitable fallout when Michael's plan imploded. I knew he would try to sweet-talk local suppliers and distributors into believing the farm was simply changing hands, not changing its ethos. I contacted my longtime business associates, the owners of the local organic markets, the artisanal cider houses, the family-owned grocery stores that had been loyal customers for decades. I sent them carefully worded, seemingly casual emails, hinting at upcoming changes, but reassuring them of the Vance Orchard's unwavering commitment to quality and sustainable practices. It was a subtle inoculation against Michael's corporate spin. Meanwhile, Michael was busy making his moves. Frank reported that he had initiated contact with AgriCorp Global's legal team, eager to finalize the sale. He was clearly feeling the pressure from his creditors. He likely thought I was settling comfortably into my new home, oblivious to his machinations. The thought almost made me laugh. The first tremor hit Michael when AgriCorp's legal team began their due diligence. They requested all property deeds, financial records, and, critically, any trust documents associated with the Vance Orchards. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I imagined Michael's initial reaction, annoyance, perhaps, at the tedious paperwork. Then, confusion. He would undoubtedly contact his own lawyer, demanding to know why these extraneous documents were being requested. His lawyer, if competent, would then uncover the existence of the Vance family irrevocable trust. The silence from Michael was palpable. For days, my phone was quiet. No frantic calls, no angry texts. This was a good sign. It meant the information was sinking in, that the full weight of his colossal miscalculation was beginning to press down on him. Then came the phone call. It wasn't Michael. It was his lawyer, Mr. Harrison. His voice was strained, clearly agitated. "Mrs. Vance, this is Arthur Harrison, Michael's attorney," he began, without preamble. "We have a situation." "Do we, Mr. Harrison?" I replied, my voice calm and steady, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt. "And what might that situation be?" "The Vance Family Irrevocable Trust," he blurted out, as if the words were a hot coal in his mouth. Michael was unaware of its existence. "Oh." I feigned surprise. He never bothered to inquire about the true ownership of the land he intended to sell. How remiss of him. "Mrs. Vance, this is highly irregular," he stammered, clearly flustered. "This trust, it prevents any sale of the property without your explicit approval, and even then, only under specific conditions. And it designates the bulk of the assets to charitable endowments upon your passing, not to Michael." "That's correct, Mr. Harrison," I said. "My husband and I spent years setting up that trust, ensuring the legacy of the orchards would be protected, and that our values would endure. It was a carefully considered decision." "But Michael was under the impression that he would inherit everything," he exclaimed. "And on what basis was that impression formed?" I challenged him gently. Did he ever ask? Did he ever review the estate plan? Or did he simply assume, as many children do, that he was entitled to everything without effort or understanding? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Harrison was clearly scrambling. "Mrs. Vance, Michael is in a very difficult financial position. He needs the funds from this sale desperately. He's facing significant issues. His financial difficulties are not my responsibility, Mr. Harrison," I stated firmly. "They are the consequences of his own choices. My responsibility, as the trustee, is to uphold the terms of the Vance Family Irrevocable Trust and protect the legacy of the orchards." "So, you're refusing to cooperate with the sale?" he asked, his voice laced with a desperate hope. "I am upholding the terms of the trust, Mr. Harrison," I reiterated. "Which means the orchard is not for sale to AgriCorp Global, or to anyone who does not align with its explicit conservation and agricultural legacy stipulations." But he has power of attorney," he sputtered, grasping at straws. "Indeed he does," I conceded. "Over my personal assets. Not over the assets of an irrevocable trust where I am merely the trustee. You might want to refresh yourself on the finer points of trust law, Mr. Harrison. I'm sure Abigail Thorne, my attorney, would be happy to enlighten you." I heard him gulp. Abigail Thorne was a formidable opponent in the legal world, known for her sharp intellect and unwavering resolve. He knew he was outmatched. "Mrs. Vance," he pleaded, his voice losing its professional edge, revealing the panic beneath. "Michael is going to be ruined. This will destroy him." "Perhaps," I said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "Or perhaps this will be a valuable lesson for him. A lesson in humility, in responsibility, and in the true value of family heritage beyond mere monetary gain." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of triumph and sadness. Michael's ruin was not what I truly wished for, but he had left me no choice. He had chosen greed over family, convenience over legacy. And now, he was facing the consequences. The next call was from Frank. "Mrs. Vance, I've got eyes on Michael. He just left his lawyer's office. Looks like he's seen a ghost. His face is pale as a sheet." A ghost. Yes, perhaps he had. The ghost of his assumptions, of his entitlement, of the life he thought he could simply take without earning. Meanwhile, back at Evergreen Manor, Michael was getting another unwelcome surprise. Frank had arranged for a subtle inquiry into my well-being from an anonymous source, specifically questioning the circumstances of my admission. This was just enough to trigger a routine, but thorough, review by the state's Elder Care Oversight Board. They would, of course, find me missing. But crucially, my disappearance wouldn't be flagged as an escape. Instead, it would appear as a failure of the facility's intake and monitoring process, and a potential case of undue influence in my admission. The phone rang again. This time, it was the director of Evergreen Manor, Ms. Davison. Her voice was icy, formal. "Mrs. Vance," she said, "we have been contacted by the State Board regarding your admission. They are inquiring about your current whereabouts." "Oh, dear," I said, feigning a gentle surprise. "And what did you tell them?" "We told them you were here, of course." "But you are clearly not," she snapped, her composure cracking. "Where are you, Mrs. Vance?" "I'm afraid that's confidential, Ms. Davison," I replied, a hint of steel in my voice now. "However, I can assure you I am safe, sound, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. Perhaps your facility needs to review its intake procedures, and the individuals who provide consent for admission." I could almost hear her jaw clench. "Are you implying that you were admitted under false pretenses?" "I am simply stating that I am an independent, competent adult who made a temporary decision to explore your facilities," I said, choosing my words carefully. "And I have since decided that they do not meet my long-term needs. As for the details of my admission, I suggest you direct those questions to my son, Michael Vance, and his attorney. They signed all the relevant paperwork, didn't they?" I left her to ponder the implications. Not only was Michael's plan to sell the farm unraveling, but his hasty decision to admit me was now backfiring, potentially jeopardizing the nursing home's licensing and reputation, and dragging him into further legal scrutiny. The dominoes were beginning to fall. My presence, or rather, my absence, at Evergreen Manor was now a thorny issue for Michael. The nursing home would undoubtedly contact him, demanding an explanation, possibly even threatening legal action for misleading them. The State Oversight Board would launch a full investigation, shining a harsh light on Michael's actions. He thought he had made me disappear. Instead, I had become an inconvenient, very public problem. The full weight of his predicament would soon crash down on him. The corporate buyers would withdraw their offer, scared off by the legal complexities of the trust and the looming investigation. His creditors would grow even more impatient, potentially initiating collection proceedings, or worse. The carefully constructed facade of his successful life was crumbling, piece by piece. He had tried to erase me, to silence me, to liquidate my past for his future. But he had forgotten one crucial thing: the past, especially one as deeply rooted as the Vance orchards, always finds a way to speak. And when it did, its voice would be loud enough to shake the very foundations of Michael's carefully constructed world. His face was about to twist in horror, learning that the very thing he sought to control, he had irrevocably lost, and in doing so, had exposed himself to a ruin far greater than any he could have imagined. The call from Michael came 2 days later, a frantic, barely coherent barrage of accusations and pleas. His voice was hoarse, raw with panic. "Mom! What have you done?" he screamed, the moment I answered. "Evergreen Manor is calling me, the State Board is investigating, and AgriCorp just pulled their offer." "What is going on?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, letting his tirade wash over me like a harmless wave. When he finally paused, breathless, I spoke, my voice calm and measured. "What's going on, Michael, is that you tried to sell something that wasn't yours to sell. And you tried to put your mother in a facility under false pretenses. The consequences of your actions are simply catching up to you. But the power of attorney. You signed the papers." He sputtered, still clinging to his delusion of control. "Indeed I did," I said, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. "But as your lawyer, Mr. Harrison, has hopefully now explained to you, a power of attorney does not give you authority over assets held in an irrevocable trust. The Vance orchards, Michael, have been in an irrevocable trust for 20 years. They are not your property to sell. They are protected, for the future of agricultural education and land preservation." There was a stunned silence on the other end, long and heavy. I could almost hear the pieces of his carefully constructed plan shattering in his mind. A trust?" He finally whispered, the horror in his voice palpable. But I didn't know about any trust. That, I said, my voice hardening slightly, is because you never bothered to ask. You were too busy assuming, too busy calculating, too busy trying to dispose of your inconvenient elderly mother and her inconvenient farm. Arthur and I established that trust precisely to prevent this kind of situation. To ensure the land would be protected, no matter what. But I'm ruined. He cried, the self-pity in his voice overriding any genuine remorse. My investments, my debts. I needed that money, Mom. I was going to lose everything. And what about me, Michael? I shot back, a sudden surge of emotion making my voice tremble slightly. What about my home? My life's work? My legacy? Did you think for one moment what it would mean to me to be locked away, while you plundered everything I hold dear to pay for your own recklessness? He was silent again, and I imagined his face, pale and twisted in horror, just as I had envisioned in my mind. The horror of losing the money, yes, but also, perhaps, the dawning realization of the sheer magnitude of his betrayal. The good news, I continued, pressing my advantage, is that Agricorp Global has wisely withdrawn their offer. And the State Board is now looking into the circumstances of my admission, which I'm sure will be an interesting conversation for you and Evergreen Manor. As for your creditors, well, that's your problem, not mine. You made your bed, Michael. Now you have to lie in it. Mom, please. He begged, his voice cracking. Please, can't we just dissolve the trust? Just for a little while? I'll pay you back. I swear. Just help me get out of this mess. No, Michael, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. The trust is irrevocable. That means it cannot be changed or dissolved. That was the whole point. And even if it could be, I wouldn't. This land is not a piggy bank for your mistakes. It is a sacred trust, a living testament to generations of Vances who poured their sweat and tears into it. I hung up before he could respond further, cutting off his pleas. I felt no joy in his despair, only a profound weariness. But also, a deep sense of justice. He needed to face the consequences of his actions, not be continually bailed out by the very people he sought to exploit. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. The state investigation into Evergreen Manor confirmed Michael's deceptive actions, and while it didn't lead to criminal charges, it cast a very public shadow over his reputation. His business dealings in Boston rapidly unraveled, and he was forced to declare bankruptcy. The lavish life he had built on shaky foundations crumbled around him. Meanwhile, I quietly, slowly, began to put my own pieces back together. Frank had found me the perfect new home, a charming, smaller farmhouse just a few miles from the orchards, owned by an old friend who was traveling abroad for a year. It was comfortable, familiar, and most importantly, free from Michael's reach. With Abigail's help, I formally appointed a new management team for the Vance Orchards, a group of dedicated local farmers and agricultural experts who shared my vision for sustainable, community-focused farming. The trust, through its scholarship endowments, would now fund young people passionate about agriculture, ensuring the knowledge and love of the land would continue for generations. The portion dedicated to land preservation was used to establish a protective easement on the orchards, guaranteeing they would remain farmland forever, safe from the likes of Agricorp Global. One crisp November morning, I drove back to the Vance Orchards. Not in Michael's sleek sedan, but in my old, reliable pickup truck, the one Arthur had bought decades ago. The air was cold, invigorating, and smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. I walked through the rows of bare apple trees, their branches reaching up like skeletal fingers against the pale sky. They seemed to hum with a quiet strength, a silent testament to endurance. As I stood by the ancient oak tree that marked the edge of our property, the same tree I had looked at from my porch swing that fateful day, I pulled out my phone. I had one more call to make. Not to Michael, not to gloat, but to close a painful chapter. I called the local newspaper, the Harmony Creek Gazette. I had been a long-time subscriber, and the editor, a kind woman named Sarah, knew me well. Sarah, it's Emma, I said, my voice clear and strong. I have a story I think your readers would be very interested in. I told her about the irrevocable trust, about Michael's attempts to sell the orchard, about my temporary retreat to Evergreen Manor, and about the careful steps I had taken to protect the farm's future. I didn't disparage Michael directly, but simply laid out the facts, letting the truth speak for itself. I focused on the positive, the preservation of the land, the new scholarships, the renewed commitment to community-supported agriculture. The story hit the front page a few days later: Vance Orchard saved, local matriarch's legacy ensured through foresight and family trust. It was a powerful piece, celebrating resilience, wisdom, and the enduring spirit of local farming. It praised Arthur's foresight and my unwavering dedication. And, subtly but unmistakably, it painted a picture of Michael's misguided attempt to exploit his family's heritage. I received an outpouring of support from the community: calls, letters, visits from old friends and neighbors. They brought pies, casseroles, and words of encouragement. It was a comforting embrace, a reminder that true wealth lay not in financial assets, but in the bonds of community and the integrity of one's character. A few months later, I received a letter from Michael. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. It was short, written on plain paper, his usual expensive stationery clearly a thing of the past. He wrote about his bankruptcy, about losing his home, about starting over with nothing. He didn't mention the trust, or the nursing home, or his betrayal. But at the very end, almost as an afterthought, there was one sentence that caught my eye: I suppose. I suppose you were right about the land, Mom. Some things are worth more than money. It wasn't much, but it was something. A glimmer of understanding, perhaps, born from the bitter harvest of his own choices. I didn't reply. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way, and some bridges, once burned, are not easily rebuilt. I spent my days back in the rhythm of the seasons, overseeing the new management team, offering advice, and, of course, baking. The smell of apple blossoms filled the air once more as spring arrived, a sweet promise of new beginnings. The Vance Orchards thrived under its new, protected status, a beacon of sustainable farming and a testament to the power of a legacy carefully tended. I was no longer Emma, the frail old woman deemed incapable. I was Emma, the matriarch who had saved her family's heritage, who had shown her son the true meaning of value, and who had ensured that the roots of the Vance Orchards ran deep enough to withstand any storm. My face might have a few more wrinkles, and my steps might be a little slower, but my spirit was stronger than ever. I had faced betrayal, fought for my legacy, and emerged victorious, not through anger or violence, but through wisdom, foresight, and the quiet power of an old woman who knew exactly what she was worth. And that, in itself, was the most satisfying retribution of all. The orchard stood, a vibrant green monument to resilience, its apples crisp and sweet, just as they had been for generations. And I, Emma, watched over it, a silent guardian, knowing that the most valuable things in life were not bought and sold, but cherished, protected, and passed on, generation after generation. The final chapter of my life was not one of quiet decline in a nursing home, but a powerful reaffirmation of my strength, my values, and the enduring legacy of the Vance Orchards. My son had learned his lesson, the hard way, about true wealth. And I, an old woman who refused to be dismissed, had ensured that the land, and the spirit of my family, would flourish for many years to come.